Hi, my name is Carol Kleppert, and on behalf of Ripon Printers, I'd like to welcome you to our online seminar, Weathering the Snowstorm of Upcoming Postal Changes. We developed this seminar specifically to help you prepare for some significant changes in design rules and rates that will impact your business. This online seminar is part of Ripon Printers Graphic Arts Connection, which brings print professionals together in an educational environment where they can explore the latest technologies, concepts, and trends impacting our businesses. The program's goal is to help you get your materials to market faster and more cost efficiently, improving the performance of your print and multi-channel campaigns. Our commitment is reflected in part by our sponsorship of today's presentation. We have a lot to accomplish in a short period of time, but when you're finished, I'm confident you'll consider the time well spent. One thing to note at the end of today's presentation, there will be a short survey that we hope you will take the time to complete. This will help us plan for future events like the one today. Also, today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website later this week. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Our first speaker, Jerry Eiler, helps oversee the pre-sorting, inkjet imaging, and mailing of more than 100 million catalogs per year. He's one of our mailing and distribution experts and brings years of experience and a wealth of current knowledge to the topic. Complementing Jerry, both in today's presentation and in supporting your mailing needs here at Ripon Printers, is Diana Ohm. Diana supervises mailing operations and the list processing team, in addition to serving as a mailing liaison among Ripon Printers customers, sales representatives, and the USPS. I'm sure that a number of you have sought Diana's counsel on postal issues and know that she is a knowledgeable veteran of postal affairs. Together, I know Diana and Jerry will deliver the information you need to navigate through the latest rounds of postal changes, and of course, they're available at the end of the webinar as well as offline to answer any of your questions. I would now like to begin the seminar by welcoming speaker Jerry Eiler to the Graphic Arts Connection. Jerry?
Thank you, Carol. We'll get the mouse thing working again. All right, next slide. I want to thank everyone for coming and attending this. We're at a point in the postal history I'm calling the Great Postal Snowstorm of 2012 because that's how it's feeling to me. The picture on the screen, we're in Wisconsin here. We're looking forward to a winter coming with a bit of snow, and it's always kind of a mixed emotional thing. It brings feelings of fear a little bit that we're going to have to deal with this stuff. But we also know that with proper planning and preparation, we can get through the winter. So,
items we're going to cover today are postage rate increase. Second topic is folded self-mailer changes, package service parcels, and lastly, we'll touch on changes to the USPS delivery.
So let's start with the postage rate increases. I think that's the most immediate thing. Most of you should know that if you're paying attention to the news at all, that effective on January 22nd, 2012, postage rates will be increasing. The rate increase is based on the Consumer Price Index. And there was a legislation passed in 2006 that limits the postage increases to the Consumer Price Index. It's not a fixed thing. It's not totally across the board. The post office has flexibility to adjust the rate, but the overall increase needs to be 2.133 in this case, which was the Consumer Price Index measure in October. It's an annual event, happens once a year. This year it's happening a bit earlier. Last year it was May. The post office has indicated their intentions of doing this March time frame for years going forward. However, in all of this, there's this thing called exigency. When the rule was established that allows the rate to be set according to the Consumer Price Index, Congress also wrote in a thing that says, well, if something really bad happens, and this was post 9/11, that will provide a method for the post office to make above Consumer Price Index increases. It was called exigent rate. And if you remember, it was 2 years ago that the post office filed for an exigent rate increase, and it was denied by the Postal Regulatory Commission. So to clarify what exigency means, so the post office would have that answer going forward, and perhaps to pursue increasing the rates, they filed a court case to argue whether that was really an exigent increase request, if that was valid or not. So that case is still in the courts and still pending. There is a movement about within some of the user groups, postal user groups, to have the post office retract that, but there's also a push from Congress and some other ups to continue with this. Our fear is that not the post office is going to take the exigent case and apply it. The post office has said they don't want to make those increases, but my concern is that Congress will see that the exigent rate case has been approved and push the post office to implement it. There's a lot of politics that goes on behind the post office rules, regulations, and postage increases. So with all that said, why don't we just start moving on and looking at some of the specific rate case issues. Now, there's a lot of numbers that go behind postage rates, and we're not going to show all of them on the screen, but I did want to put some numbers up just to show trends. Get my laser pointer out, and over here on the right side of the screen, you can see numbers in red. I'm sorry, I have a bunch of slides with a lot of numbers. Try not to look at the individual numbers. What we're really looking for in these slides is trending information to help know what is going to make sense, what the increases mean to you in a general sense, and which way you want to go as a long-term plan. So what these numbers in red indicate is a percentage increase based on the current rates to the rates that will be implemented in 2012. So everyone knows, if you watch the news at all, that the postage stamp is going to go up a penny. The forever stamp is the one you can buy now at current rates, and they'll stay good for forever. So go ahead and do that. You know the rate's coming. Now is the time to buy those forever stamps. But looking at pre-sorted mail, which is what most of the people who are in this webinar are doing, you can look at some changes that are happening. Let's look at first class just to get a feel for things. When we pre-sort, there are requirements that determine what rate we can claim. So the more pieces we have to a more specific area, the lower the postage rate becomes. So the 5D is the 5-digit area specific post office. So if we have enough pieces per the regulation to sort to 5D, then we can apply that rate to those pieces. Otherwise, we drop down to an appropriate rate. Machinable being there's things that are disqualifying it for the automation rates. So if we look at on the right, we can see that actually the increases are not linear like what you'd think. The 5-digit auto gets a higher increase, but the mixed also gets even a higher increase. The AEDC, where a lot of the mail goes, is really where the sweet spot is. What was surprising to me looking at the rates was the hit the cards are taking. Where postcards still, if you look at the rates here compared to what the letters are, postcards still are a better value, if that's what you want to call it, a cheaper rate than the letters, but they are being disproportionately increased. And then flats as well have a very surprising change of prices based on their pre-sort value. Let's try that one. Okay, periodicals. This would be the old second-class mail. Periodicals has an extremely complicated rate structure. And there are rates for each piece, rates for each pound of advertising, rates for each pound of non-advertising. Besides that, there are charges for each container made, each sack, each pallet. And I didn't want to put all those numbers on. I just wanted to show that the rates in periodicals are sticking within that 2.133 range. Most of the numbers, what you see on the screen right now, are the piece rates that are under 2.133. And the same would be true for the pound rates. What was really interesting looking at it was that there's about a 15% increase on the per pallet rate. So there's going to be a little bit more incentive to make bigger pallets in periodicals mail, and which can affect how you enter the mail and try to get the best delivery standards, a whole other topic. We'll move on to bound printed matter. This is the stuff that weighs over a pound. Again, this is just an overview of the rates. Bound printed matter rates are based on zones and pre-sort levels, and it's a lot of tables. In general, the rates, what's really interesting to look at is the bound printed matter flats having only the 0.5% increase. That's good news for most of our mailers. Bound printed matter parcels, which would be the stuff that's over 3/4 of an inch thick, has a little higher rate. The single piece parcel post stuff is where the real increase happened. And now this is where really for Ripon printers the rubber meets the road. Standard mail is what we do here, most of us, what our customers are doing. And this is where we want to spend a little bit of time looking at the numbers in a little more detail. So I've got more complicated charts to show on the screen, but again, try not to get lost in the numbers. We're really looking at trends here. One thing that's pretty common throughout all of the post office increases is that carrier route rates are going up higher than the rest of the rates. But below that, you can see the trend where right here in the 5-digit or 3-digit AADC, where the lowest increase is mixed to auto, 5-digit actually got a little higher increase. That's an interesting trend. What's more interesting to me is looking down here at the nonprofit rates. You can see here this is marked as nonprofit. And nonprofit mailers are actually going to see a decrease in rates. And this is really due to some federal legislation that mandates the ratio of the nonprofit rate to the cost of delivering the mail. So there's an adjustment that was needed within this rate structure to bring the nonprofit rates into legal compliance. We can still see the trend. What we've got going left to right, here, these numbers, the first 3 columns of numbers, are the origin entry, same up for here. NDC, which was the old BMC, which would be mail that would be taken in trucks to one of the larger mail processing facilities, and then the sectional center facility. This would be the post offices that handle everything that begins with the same first 3 digits of the zip code. So as we look across, we can see in the standard rate table that the numbers increase as we go deeper into the system. This is basically reducing, to some small degree, the benefits of drop shipping. And this trend also applies, for the most part, down here, it's not as much. You can see that the discounts are actually sometimes higher in nonprofit, but for the most part, our mailers are going to see some slightly less benefit in drop shipping. There's 2 factors, the postage rates and the shipping and processing charges. The shipping charges are dynamic. They're based on fuel charges, so that's not something you can easily plan through the year for, but the changes haven't been in the whole picture of things that significant. So these numbers look like you'd be able to use them for some kind of planning purposes. Now, that previous page was the rate charts. What I've done on this page, and we'll look at it again in flat mail, the same kind of a thing, is I've created some hypothetical pre-sorts. So I took 1,000 names, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, and sorted them and applied the old rates and new rates to look at what like a real-life postage change would look like. And we're seeing less than the 2.13% as a general rule. The 1.87, 1.96 makes more sense. Then going to the right, CoPal is a option that we offer here where we will prepare the mail at Ripon and then it gets shipped to another facility and merged together with a whole bunch of other letter mail to try to get deeper into the system. It doesn't enhance pre-sort, but it does utilize drop ship techniques to try to get moving the pieces from the origin pallet or the NDC pallet into the SCF pallet. So we're still seeing pretty decent benefits and actually lower increases based on moving the pieces, being able to move the pieces within COPAL. The important numbers to really look at is the actual end of the job number, right? The COPAL numbers listed here would include the additional freight values and the processing fees. So these are fairly good comparisons to look at what you could expect if your postage in local entry, origin entry, was $26,000. Saving $3,000 would be what we would expect under the new rates for a 100,000 piece mailing. Nonprofit, again, looking at these final numbers, these are really what you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to make a decision between COPAL and using COPAL and its associated schedule requirements, and there's a little bit of delay in the mail associated with this. If you want to really just work at the price of the mail, this is a really good tool. So there are benefits. The benefits are increasing with this. Standard flats. Within flats, there's two rate structures. Less than 3.3 ounces, everyone pays the same rate per piece. So a 1 ounce piece, a 2 ounce piece, a 3 ounce piece, all pays the exact same postage rate. Drop shipping charges are, of course, change because that's all based on weight. But as we look across, we're going to see the same kind of trend here, where same for many cases, as long as there's enough volume there to offset the shipping charges. And this is this chart shows both the piece and the pound rate. So as we look through the sorts, we can see that the carrier route stuff gets a bigger hit, and as we look down the pre-sort, we can see a fairly 1-2% number, not a big number, but the mixed gets a bigger hit. Machinable is the stuff that is non-automation. So the piece is designed for automation, but the address doesn't qualify. So the rates on here also are kind of trending in that same direction. As we go across again, we see the drop ship numbers. These origin pound rates increase quite a bit as we go to the right. So drop shipping is less incentivized. Nonprofit is at the bottom again. We can see that there's a decrease in some of the pound rates, or in the piece rates, but the pound rates all have increases that also go higher as we go deeper into the system. So let's take a look at this again as well and try to apply some real-world cases. These are similar pre-sorts. Of course, flat mail sorts differently than letter mail. You end up with more pieces in higher rates very quickly than with flat mail rather than letter mail. But so here we're seeing a bit higher increase in the flats than we did with the letters. We see again the trend. Because this is weight-based, I've got sorts based on the weight of the piece as well, so we can kind of try to look at if the heavier piece or the lighter piece, who's going to fare the best in this. And the 3 ounce and is the best rate. The 15 ounce has the second best rate. As we zero in the 6 ounces, we're seeing pretty much across the board the highest increases of the 6 ounce rate. And we can look at the quantities and see that as we go down this chart and we get to bigger quantities, that the rate decreases with a larger quantity. And going left over to the right, we see the co-mail numbers. And again, we see a lower increase in the co-mail, pretty much across the board, which indicates that co-mail is going to be more incentivized under the new rates. Not a lot. Part of this is because the shipping rates are not increasing with this. They're more stable. In fact, the co-mail rates have been very stable over the last year. And the other thing we can look at on this chart, these are sample postage savings over local entry mail, over origin entry mail. These are things that we would see 15% is the highest one. In reality, a lot of our customers are seeing up to 17%, but what's important on this chart is the trending. That's what will be more accurate in the numbers. We're seeing a better savings under the new rates than under the old rates for co-mail. So with all those charts and all those numbers out there, you can see the increases are, moderate for the most cases. planning and going forward, there's more incentive to utilize the co-mail. You need to be understanding what those terms imply, because there are delivery standards and schedule standards that need to meet with that. In nonprofit mail, we're seeing the same kind of trends that we saw in the previous nonprofit. There are rate increases in the flat mail across the board for nonprofits as well. No discounts, no decreases, but the increases are much smaller. So those guys got good news, good for them. So within the rate case, I'm sure there's lots of questions about specific jobs. We're happy to address those on a case-by-case basis. Just let us know what your questions are. We'd be happy to look at it. Now, there is another factor in a lot of these issues. The rate case that's listed are specifically the postage values. There are some other things that will have an effective rate increase. One of the important ones is something that we really want to put out there and make everyone aware of. There was what I was always calling the flat exception. Mailers who had a piece that was otherwise a letter-sized piece, so it would be under 6 1/8, under 11 1/2, and under a 1/4 inch thick, that had not complied with one of the automation requirements, and I've listed a couple of them below, the 3-ounce rule. So if you were in the small size and your piece weighed over 3 ounces, we have customers that have done that they didn't want to have the address running the long way. It was running perpendicular to the spine, or they didn't want tabs on the piece. Rather than moving the piece into the non-machinable letter rate, we were able to transfer them into automation flat rate, which is higher than the letter rate, but it mitigated some of the price increases. Well, the post office is changing the rule, eliminating the exception, so that in order to be a flat, you absolutely have to go over 6 1/8, or you have to go over 11 1/2 in length, and height and length are always relative to the address, or be over a 1/4 inch thick. Weight is not one of the exception issues. Being over 3 ounces does not allow you to move into flat. So if you're the small size piece and heavy or address orientation, and you maintain that now, you will pay the non-machinable letter rates. And I still have my laser thing going, so that'll work good for this next screen. What I'm showing here is the proposed rates, or the future rates, this is the automation mail rates. So if you're mailing automation letters, 5-digit pieces, they pay 24 cents. Moving into non-machinable, you're going to pay 39.2. So that's a significant increase. When we look at the auto flats, well, the 5-digit auto flat is 35.3. But the truth is that because of the sortation differences, the requirements are for claiming the 5-digit numbers are much smaller quantities. The effective rate becomes more something like what I'm showing on the screen now, where rather than comparing the 392 to the 353, we're comparing 54.2. So these pieces that would have moved to 26.2, we would have moved to closer to the 35.3 before, are going to go up to 54.2. And a lot of the mailers, until you get into the hundreds of thousands of pieces, you don't get 5-digit in letters. So this is a concern. If you were in that range where you're using the flat exception, it's going to go away. You need to talk to your printer, your producer, your customer service rep about which way you want to go, either to plan to pay for this or to avoid it. So moving on, I've got this great picture. Well, in the wintertime, you're living in Wisconsin, it's going to snow. You got to be ready for it. One of my activities is skiing. I actually ski patrol. And the important job is, from the outside look, is to get the hurt people down the hill. So if you're seeing this view, you made a bad mistake on a ski hill. This is not where we want you to be. In my mind, the ski patrol's main function is to prevent these injuries. So what we want to do in going forward is talk about some things that are coming up in the future that require you to plan, so you're not on the toboggan, that you're skiing down the hill on your own.
Okay, and that next item will be folded self-mailers, but first of all, I want to just thank you, Jerry, for pulling together all those rates and charts for us. I know that it was time-consuming for you, but get everybody kind of thinking about what's coming for them. Keep in mind that effective date of January 22nd.
Right. The numbers are confusing, and there's a lot of them, but hopefully that kind of puts some perspective to things. So, within folded self-mailers, yes. the next challenge.
Next is now, first of all, to define what a folded self-mailer is. And according to the USPS, a folded self-mailer is formed of panels. They are created with one or more unbound sheets of paper, are folded together and sealed to make a letter-like mail piece. And you can see the key words there are unbound and sealed. And we will also be talking about panels a little later on in the presentation.
And I just wanted to digress just a little bit on this, that, you know, our purpose in this is really today not to educate you in the entirety of this rule. The rules are more complicated than we wish they were. They require planning and studying. We want today to make you aware of the rule and then provide you some tools to go forward and check into this more. What happened with the folded self-mailers, a couple years ago there was a change in the booklet rules that required bigger tabs. There was a big hubbub. We needed to put 3.5-inch tabs that changed the size of the piece. At that time, the post office originally had proposed aligning the folded self-mailers with the booklet rules. But that really would have wiped out a lot of the folded self-mailers in short notice, didn't give any real consideration to what that particular piece of mail needed to look like. So because of all the outcry, which that is the user groups getting together and telling the post office what's needed, because of that outcry, the folded self-mailer was tabled for discussion and study. And so what we have now is a result of 2 years of study of what works for the post office and what works for the mail producers. So it's a compromise rule. So going forward, what a folded self-mailer is, this new definition is not optimal, but it's what we've come up with to work for both the post office and us.
Okay. Here on this slide, we're just kind of trying to get you in the realm of thinking how letters can be mailed. There are really three main ways that a letter can go through the postal system. First of all, the left-hand image you can see is an envelope. It can be enclosed in something. Second image in the center there is just a sample of a folded self-mailer. And on the right-hand side, that diagram is showing you that that's a bound piece. And so that is what we know as right now as the booklet.
There is a fourth category that really applies to Netflix and the people who are doing that, and it's a CD mailer. The post office has created a separate category for them, but that really is a small group of large mailers.
Okay, the requirements for the folded self-mailers are going to be in effect as of January 5th, 2013.
That's a year from now, so we have lots of time to prepare.
But they are allowed now, which, like Jerry just mentioned, is a time for preparation. It's time to research, do your homework, figure out what's going to work best for you, to maybe alter some things you have, or see if what you're doing is going to fit into the realm.
There are some things that are allowed in these new standards that were not allowed in the old standards. So the other part of the post office allowing the implementation of this now is that right now for this next year you actually have more choices than you had before. So for the next year you can still do what you were doing, but we really encourage you to start looking at this and making plans for how you're going to comply on January 5th.
Here we are with some of the data now, just kind of a little bit of a data dump here. These are the specs for folded self-mailers. They can be 3.5 by 5 to 6 by 10.5 inches.
That's correct. And this is the first significant change. There are two big changes in the rules. One's the paradigm of panels. The other is this reduction in size. You used to be able to be 6 1/8 by 11.5. So there's a reduction in the size that you're allowed to be.
The minimum thickness is 0.009, and then with these a little bit smaller pieces, you can be a little bit lighter weight at the 0.007. And then the last three items, the 1/4 inch max thickness, 3 ounce maximum weight, and rectangular in shape to meet that aspect ratio of 1.3 to 2.5. Those last three items are already in effect now.
Right. These are the rules that have been in effect for a long time.
Okay, now what is a panel? The definition here is the piece is folded. The number of thicknesses of the paper is the number of panels. So then you look at how the paper is folded. The first example is a single sheet folded in half makes a bifold. You take that same single sheet, fold it in thirds. It's a trifold, which we kind of know as a letter fold in the industry right now. And then you take a sheet and fold it in half, and then in half the other direction. That creates 4 panels, which now would be called a quarter fold.
Understanding what a panel is really important into being able to implement the new regulation, the new standards for folded self-mailers. This is a critical part because there is a limitation in the number of panels that are allowed. So folding in half here creates 2 panels. There's 2 thicknesses of paper after the fold. There are going to be also limitation requirements. This shows the address running parallel to the fold with the fold at the bottom. This is a requirement under the new rule. In the old rules, we could put 2 tabs on the bottom edge and mail it, or 1 edge on the top. That changes in 2013.
On this slide, we're showing the trifold. You can see the colored panels on the left then, and then showing on the right-hand side how that would be constructed as a fold, with that back panel being the back of the mail piece.
This is a reference from the Domestic Mail Manual, or the new rule. And so the number 201.3.14.3 is the Domestic Mail Manual reference, and this is the literal text of it. The final folded panel creates the back or non-addressed side of the mail piece. The open edge has got to be at the top, and C reiterates that the final fold has to be at the bottom unless it's prepared as an oblong. We'll look at that in a second. So coming back to this trifold piece, according to the rule, the final fold is the back non-addressed piece that limits you to one side where you can put this address. So watch your design, plan for this. This is part of the rule. There is another thing that we're going to bring up in a little bit called flaps that kind of confuses this issue, but for the standard folded self-mailer and the trifold configuration, this is going to be the way the address has to be laid out.
Here we have an oblong fold, and it is showing in the diagram the fold being on the right-hand side, and then the open edges on the left, which then would have to be enclosed by tabs or glue strips. And just to let you know that right-hand side is where the fold is. The reason why the post office always sets things up on the right-hand side as the folded edges is because that's the lead edge, what they determine the lead edge, going through their USPS equipment first. So they want that smooth and flat and as sturdy as it can be so that it holds up in their equipment, in their system.
Okay. There's a quarter folded piece. This is made by folding a sheet in half and then a sheet again in half on the opposite direction. The requirements will be that secondary fold, the first fold, end up to the right of the address. So the way it's presented on the screen is where the address has to be. It can't be on the opposite side of this piece. It needs to be so that the final fold's at the bottom, the secondary fold is to the right. And there are additional tabbing requirements. This piece will fall into more of the booklet-style tabbing.
Now your panel maximum is 12, but there is an exception to that with the quarter-folded pieces. If they are on 55-pound or greater newsprint, they must have at least 8 panels, but they may have up to 24 panels.
Just on those quarter-fold newsprint pieces.
Yeah.
This is a big thing. That 12-panel restriction is probably one of the biggest factors in limiting what people have been able to do. If you're mailing trifold single sheet stuff, it's not a bother, but it really is if you've been mailing some more complicated folded stuff with multiple pages. There's another concept in this besides panel called a flap. A flap is an extension of a panel that's used to seal the piece, or it could be an extension of a panel internally that is used to secure an enclosure. So flaps are not panels, they're extensions of panels, and it's used specifically to close the folded self-mailer.
This is a diagram that we pulled out of a technical sheet that the USPS has put out, and it really is going to be helpful for design purposes. What we really wanted to kind of point out in this slide was in that middle section there, looking at the flap information. That is showing the non-addressed side of the piece. So just keep in mind that's the back of your mail piece. The maximum, or excuse me, the minimum that first diagram is showing is 1.5 inch. It has to be a minimum of the flap that's coming down from that top. The second diagram is showing that the flap coming down from the bottom, it can be no closer than 1 inch to the bottom of the edge. And the third diagram is die cut. That is also allowed.
Yeah.
That needs to be 5-inch minimum.
This is the oblong piece.
And then the last one is when it's like a partial.
Which is also an oblong. This is a flap.
Yes.
And so watch the limitations if you're going to use flaps. Right? The pieces have to be sealed, much like letters have always been required to be sealed. We had tabbing requirements in the past. Some gluing was allowed. Tabbing and gluing continue to be both allowed. The change with tabbing is perf tabs are no longer allowed. So this effectively removes the ability to use clear tabs. Clear tabs are clear plastic. Putting clear plastic without a perf on a piece is essentially sealing it with Scotch tape. It means you're going to tear the piece apart to get into it. Clear is allowed, but they cannot be perfed.
The other thing is with the weight of the piece. You have to consider now how heavy the piece is. When you have pieces up to 1 ounce, you need to use at least that 1 inch size tab, but over 1 ounce, you need to use a 1.5 inch tab.
And I just want to reiterate that the open edge of the piece has to be at the top of the mail piece. We no longer can put tabs on the bottom edge. Another sheet off of the folded self-mailer technical reference, and we'll give you a link to this later on. This is a document I would strongly suggest anyone who's designing folded self-mailers get a copy of this. This is showing the standards for sealing, where tabs can be applied, what size tabs, what glue lines are required. So if you look, I'm going to grab the laser again. If you look here, non-perforated tabs, we're allowed to place the tabs head and foot or on the face. There's always 2 of them. The size requirement depends on the weight of the piece. In the quarter fold, we require 3 tabs. Glue lines are listed up above. You can use a solid, dots, or lines. It's 3 or 4 glue dots depending on the weight of the piece again. Click there. Basis weight requirements. This is a tougher one. You know, basis weight there's several ways to measure basis weight. In the past, the postal rules, if you go back to the early 2000s, the post office was listing basis weights based on bond paper, so you had to have a 20-pound something or a 22-pound minimum weight for certain things. The post office, when the booklet rules changed, they transitioned to using book-grade basis weights. It's based on a larger sheet of paper, more like how the roll stock or the larger sheet stuff is measured. So what translates from 20-pound on the copier paper, it's not 20-pound in this grade. A 50-pound sheet in book is more like 20-pound in the copier. So we've given some numbers. Go ahead, Diana. You can take that.
As far as the weight of the piece, again, you need to be looking at if your piece is up to 1 ounce weight, the requirement would be a minimum of 70-pound book grade. If you go over that 1 ounce, then you need to have at least an 80-pound book grade.
Okay. Just for a reference, I put that 8.5 by 11 sheet of 70 pounds, about a quarter ounce. So you could use 4 sheets before you have to go up to 80 pound. 2 sheets, 11, 17, something on that order. But again, check with your printer or your producer to be sure there's variation in paper as you go. Perforations are allowed if they're like for reveals or die cut stuff. Those things happen on the non-address side. The basis weight changes, tabbing rules change, and now there are requirements for the tie to cut ratio on perfs. So you need to look at that. We'll come back to a page. Die cuts are allowed for address reveals. Then you're allowed 1 die cut on that address side for that, or you can have 2 die cuts on the back side for like a pull-off thing to see the special offer inside. There are placement rules for this as well, so you need to be aware. This page is kind of hard to read. This is the decision tree from the technical sheet. This is an important document. It's something that you're going to need to use. We'll zoom in a little bit and just get a picture of it. You can see across the top that here, basic FSM, basic folded self-mailer. Here's the quarter fold. You have tear-off devices, and as you go to the right, you can see some other choices. And then down from there here are the different rule categories. So here, a basic folded self-mailer can have up to 12 panels, needs to be on this paper. So you can look at that and make some decisions about how you're designing your piece. I recommend that your designers get familiar with this page.
Here's another page, also in that document, and it is by no means all of the options that are available for folded self-mailers, but it gives you a real good idea of things to think about, see where your piece might fit into the realm of things, and just give you an idea of what some of the options that you have are out there. But don't let this limit you. You know, there are other designs.
This does show tabbing replacement requirements and things like that, where the die cuts can be. So this is a starting place and a good guide for your designer to get an idea of what to make sense of these rules. Inserts are allowed. You can have loose pieces that are not loose, secured. They need to be secured. They need to be made out of paper, and there are thickness limitations based on the overall weight of the piece. They don't count as panels. So, you know, the panels are the folded piece folded up. The inserts, they're pretty limited to how thick it can be, but they're allowed to be inside the piece as well. Besides inserts, there's attachments. So attachments can be inside or outside. There's things that are securely glued down to the whole piece. They have been, in the past, governed by the DMM rules in 201.313. Those aren't changing. So everything you could do with repositionable notes in the past, or release cards, or putting stickers on the outside, you still can do it. There are some restrictions on the thickness of internal attachments. But at the bottom, this is for quarter fold. The restriction for the thickness is a lot tighter. 12-point stock is the most you can put inside a quarter fold. So what this is about, you had a piece that was 24 pages, folded up. You know, you can't do it anymore. What are you going to do? If your piece that you really love to make doesn't fit within these new rules, you have three choices. You can redesign it to fit within the new standards. You can bind it and turn it into a booklet. So if you needed more panels, just put some staples or glue in it. Then the panel requirement goes away. It falls into the booklet rules. The other choice is to enclose it in an envelope. There is a fourth choice, and that's to pay the much higher postage rate.
And we really don't want you to do that. So we're hoping that we've given you some things to think about and some good options. And
we want you to bring your concerns to us and talk to us about ways that we can help you mitigate these new requirements. We've listed some references for you. The top is a web link to that tech sheet that we've shown a few pages out of, 5 pages, good information. The next one is for you legally technical guys. This is the updated DMM reference, the Federal Register rule posting. The third one is the RIBS website. The post office has two websites, USPS.com, where everyone knows to go to check rates and whatever. There's also this USPS.gov. It's a secure site. They got hacked, so they had to fix it. But this is where all of the rules and the really detailed stuff about the post office is. Not the easiest to navigate, but there's a ton of information there. The two bottom ones are samples, postcom.org and catalogmailers.org. I would encourage everyone to be a member of a user group. Your voice to the post office as an individual is a little squeaky, hardly heard noise, but as a group you can have a voice. Postcom is a great one to go to, and in fact, one of the things I would encourage you to do is to contact your Congress people, your senators, your House representative people. Postcom on the right side of their page, under Things You Should Know, has a link to how to contact those people. Great tool. Go look around on Postcom and consider joining that organization. another thing, huh?
Yep, another topic.
So this is another rule change that effectively the rule is supposed to be implemented July 22, or coming up in the next month, but they kind of neutered the rule until July 2nd. So the rule exists, but there's no penalties. But what it's requiring is anything that's a package service piece, anything that's over a pound, or anything that's over a parcel that's over 3/4 of an inch thick. So all of those pieces, where we used to print the postnet code or the IMB code that you're familiar with, this one, those no longer are allowed. This is the barcode that will be required in order to just even claim pre-sort rates. So if you don't have this barcode on the piece, you can't even claim pre-sort. You pay single piece rate. This is pretty close to relatively in scale. So this barcode is about 1.25 inches tall, 4 inches long. It's going to take up a lot more real estate. You still need the address with it. So we're talking a little over 2 inches vertical space, 4.5 or so longitudinally to have your address information. You'll need to leave room on the piece. We are still working out with different technologies we're using to print this. We have some solutions, and we're working at even better ones to be more efficient. But if you are one of those people who are mailing things that weigh over a pound, you're going to need to leave a bigger address area.
Like Jerry said, they are putting the rule in effect or implementing as of January 22nd, but actually not enforcing until July 2nd, approximately.
Correct. We have one other topic that we want to touch over briefly in the last minute we have here, and that's the delivery standards. There's been a lot of stuff in the news. Diana just got an update from our business service representative about the use of in-home dates.
Right, and they were explaining, and they said effective immediately that they are not able to recognize those in-home requests that are a lot of times printed on a piece. You might have, for example, something printed on your piece.
Like, please, postmaster, deliver by Christmas.
Yes, yeah. Or deliver between, December 15th and December 18th. But what's happening is the Postal Service is a lot more automated. They have a lot more equipment, that their mails and their sorts are being put into postal carrier order, and the carriers are not manually looking at those pieces. So most of the time those messages aren't going to be seen. And the other impact is just the efficiency and the cutback in workforce, and that's where a lot of that equipment comes into play. So what they've said is basically it's going to be mail first in, first out. Right. Of course, they give priority above class of mail, first class periodical, standard mail, and then package services, and then start over in that same sort again. And so in some respects, it could be a little bit more fair. The way the mail comes in, timing-wise, will be the first mail in, the first mail out, but it will have some impact on customers where the post office was maybe able to help out with that to some degree.
Delivery standards have been in the news a lot, too, and post office closings is a big thing. The post office has been planning for a long time to reduce their structure because they have to. The volume is gone. They can't support the infrastructure that they have now. And it's going to affect all of us in closings of local processing centers. There's a lot of news about what's going to happen to the delivery statistics of the mail. And it is a factor for first-class mail. We just lost our local Oshkosh sectional center facility. Everything's moved up to Green Bay. So stuff that we lick the stamp and put it in the mail has to go all the way up to Green Bay before it can get delivered. It's going to take an extra day. Our bulk mail that we produce heads straight to Chicago. It's really not affected by these delivery standards as much. Post office does have a lot of problems right now being consistent with delivery. That's like everyone's main complaint about the post office. We'll see how that pans out as things kind of stabilize going forward. So with all that, I just wanted to leave this one picture. This is a vacation shot, and winter's over. The summer is coming. As much as all of this looks confusing and complicated, it's something we all can get through and make the best of it, and we'll end up sitting on the beach at the end of this, enjoying ourselves. Just take a minute and rest and breathe and relax in this one. So we want to thank you very much for coming. We got Carol coming back. Are there any questions, Carol, that we can answer?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Jerry and Diana for the presentation and say, wow, what a lot of information. If you wish to contact either Diana or Jerry, the information is shown there, or you can contact just the general Ripon printers. And before we get into the questions, I do again want to ask you to remember to fill out the survey at the end of the presentation so we know what topics we can work on next time. Okay, we can start with some questions. Will there be changes in bulk nonprofit?
Absolutely. The rates are changing across the board. Everyone's got a slightly different overall. It ends up 2.133. If there are specific questions, what I'd ask you to do is email Diana or myself or the sales people, or give us a call and tell us the specifics about what your mailing is, and we'll give you a real-life answer for your real-life problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if we could go back to slide 49. It shows, I believe, the reference links.
Here we go.
That you kind of went through quickly, so if people want to jot those down again.
We'll be happy to leave this on the screen while if there's any other questions that we can answer.
Okay. Let's see. Can I find out the rate changes for my mailing list?
Like I said, answer the same kind of answers for the bulk nonprofit question.
Okay.
What we'd like you to do is give us a call, whether you're a customer or not. We'll try to answer your questions, but we'd like to deal with that on a specific basis. There's just the rate tables are very complicated. There's a lot of different numbers. Trying to present them all it would just really mush everyone's brain. So I'd rather give you a real life answer. I'd rather give you a real life answer for your real life problem.
That makes sense. I don't want to have mush. How do I know what basis weight I'm using for the stock on my folded self-mailer?
Good question. That's something that you need to check with your printer about, what kind of paper grades that you're using. That's a real production oriented question, and something that you always should be talking to your mail producer about. If you're printing these things yourself, like I said, 20-pound bond is like 50-pound book grade. There are some online tables that you could Google basis weight up and look at that. The 70-pound is really about 28-pound equivalent then bond. So you can use those numbers to try to figure it out, but the best thing is just to talk to your printer. They're there. They should be there to help you. You should expect that from them.
And we're hoping that some of the information we gave you today will give you some intelligent questions to ask that person that you're working with, and so that you're both on the same page and you're getting the correct information for what you need to get your mailing piece through the system in an automated fashion and the most efficient and cost-effective way.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Regarding business mailers, my understanding is you will be able to send a second ounce
free,
of mail free starting January 22nd. Will let firms stuff more advertising and other material into their postal first-class mail. Can you touch on that?
Well, that's true. Much like within the letters, everyone under 3 ounces pays the same rate. What's happened in the past with first class is there was an ounce rate, and then you would start paying additional. Well, the post office effectively on the 22nd has extended that beginning rate up to 2 ounces. So up to 2 ounces, you get the same equivalent 1 ounce rate. So again, if there's a specific job that you're asking about, those are things we want to handle on a case-by-case basis. But that is a definite factor that's playing into this, is the second ounce is free, or same price. Nothing's free.
Not with the post office. Okay. Well, looking at the time, it looks like we're near the end of our time allotment. I want to thank our speakers again, Jerry Eiler and Diana Ohm, for their informative presentation. I think we all learned a lot about how to deal with the USPS changes. We want to personally thank everyone who's on today for attending. I know it's difficult to break away from your normal workload, even for an hour, but I hope we provided information that will make your job easier and your mail distribution more efficient and trouble-free. I did want to, again, let everybody know that there will be a link to this presentation on our website. If not tomorrow, then probably early next week, so you can listen to this recording again. And enjoy the rest of your day, and happy holidays. And we hope you join us again. Thank you.